When did you realize your parents were bad at parenting? When I was 7, my dad would make me count his tip money every night after his shift at the restaurant. He'd dump all these crumpled bills on my bed and hand me a little notebook where I had to write down the total. He told me it was to help me get better at math, and I believed him because I was struggling in school. But one night, I counted wrong. I wrote $87 when it was actually $78, and instead of just correcting my mistake, he grabbed my arm so hard it left marks and said we'd have to start all over. He made me count 5 times in a row until almost midnight, even though I had school the next day. The next morning at breakfast, he acted like nothing happened. He even made me pancakes and told me I was getting really good at counting. I remember feeling confused because I thought maybe I'd imagined how angry he got. A few days later, I was at my friend Trevor's house and his dad came home from work. He emptied his pockets on the kitchen counter and I immediately stood up and asked if he wanted me to count it. Trevor looked at me weird and his dad just laughed and said, "No, buddy, that's not your job." On the way home, Trevor asked why I thought I had to count his dad's money. I told him about my counting job and he said, "That's messed up. My dad says child labor is illegal." I didn't know what that meant exactly, but it stuck with me. The next time my dad dumped his tips on my bed, I noticed something. The money smelled like beer and cigarettes, not food from the restaurant. And there were always way more singles than made sense for a waiter. I started watching him more carefully and realized he wasn't even going to the restaurant most nights. He'd leave in nice clothes, but come back smelling like smoke with red eyes. One day I decided to follow him. I told my mom I was sleeping over at Trevor's, but instead I rode my bike to where my dad's car was parked. It wasn't at the restaurant. It was behind this rundown building with neon signs. I peeked through a window and saw him dealing cards at a table with men smoking cigars. That night, I learned my dad wasn't a waiter. He was running an illegal poker game, and he wasn't having me count money to teach me math. He was using me as his accountant because if he got caught, he could say I just made up numbers because I was a kid. The worst part came a few weeks later when 2 men showed up at our door asking for my dad. My mom told them he wasn't home, but one of them said, "Tell him Joey wants the $1,200 his kid miscounted." I froze on the stairs, knowing it was my mistake that night when I wrote down the wrong number. After they left, my mom just sat at the kitchen table crying. I asked her if dad was in trouble and she said, "Your father's always in trouble." That's when she told me she'd been saving money to leave him for months. She just hadn't found the right time. 3 days later, while my dad was at work, we packed our things and moved to my grandma's house. My dad showed up there once, pounding on the door at 2 a.m., yelling that he needed his Lucky Charm back. He meant me. My grandma called the police, and when they came, they found betting slips and someone else's credit cards in his wallet. He got arrested right there on her front lawn. The day of his court hearing, my mom let me stay home from school. She sat me down and apologized for letting him use me like that. She said, "I thought I was protecting you by staying, but I was just teaching you that it's okay to be used." I still struggle with math to this day, but not because I'm bad at it, because every time I count money, I remember how it felt to know my dad saw me as a tool, not a son, and no amount of counting will ever add that up to love.